Hello YouTube, Sidekick here with another A4 Skyhawk video, but this time we're not going to focus on flying. It's a little bit of a different video today. Today I'm going to go back over the videos I've already made and take a look at them. See, I started making these videos because I wanted to do something with the A4 Skyhawk, and I wanted to do something that would help people learn how to fly the airplane. But there were plenty of really good tutorial videos out there from Grim Reapers and from other people. And I didn't really feel like just doing a tutorial was really going to add very much to the conversation. Plus, I wanted to make some missions that were really made for the A4 that would have been typical of the kind of missions that were flown at the time that it was flying, which is in the days before precision-guided munitions and even in the days before computed impact points. In fact, in the 1950s and even into the 1960s, the methods of using air power really hadn't changed very much since the days of the Second World War. And that means that the kind of missions that the Skyhawk flew were fundamentally different than the kind we see today. It really was still used almost in mass bombing campaigns where the way to neutralize the target was to drop an awful lot of ordnance on it rather than trying to be very strategic and very precise about getting rounds on target. So I wanted to think a little bit about that. I did some reading and read up on how the Skyhawk was used in Vietnam particularly, and I thought maybe it would be kind of fun to try and recreate missions that were like those, and then also record the videos of me flying the missions so that people could see exactly how the airplane got used in those kinds of missions. But I wanted the videos to be short and I wanted them to be entertaining, so I didn't spend a lot of time explaining all of those things in the video. So now maybe I thought I would make a review video and we can go back and look at those things a little bit more carefully. And it kind of breaks down in three ways. In all of the videos you can learn a little bit about just how to use the airplane, how to interact with the model in DCS. I think you can learn a little bit about tactics, techniques, and procedures, how to actually employ the weapon system, and I'll point out that I am by no means an expert in this. The ways I do things in the video are just the ways that seem to work for me. I'd really appreciate it if anybody wanted to leave comments and talk about better ways of doing some of those things. And the last thing is you can learn a little bit about planning missions, whether they're missions you make yourself or whether they're somebody else's mission that you performed. Learning a little bit about how to make sure that you're using the airplane in a way that's going to give you the best chance of having a successful mission. So, if you want to hear about that, stay tuned to the video. If you've just been enjoying the videos because you're an experienced sim pilot and they're just kind of entertaining, then this video may not be for you, but I'm really glad that you've been enjoying the videos so far. So let's jump right in. The first video, Haiphong Harbour, is really a very simple mission. We just essentially do a canyon run, then we pop up over the side and drop some bombs on the harbor. There's really not a whole lot going on with the aircraft systems in this one. There's a little bit of interaction with the AWCS at the beginning, although I noticed looking back on the video I obscured it with the air photo. So here's a quick look at what it actually looked like if we didn't have the air photo in the way. You can see that it's a pretty basic setup. We've got the center pylon and the two outer pylons selected because those are the ones that have the bombs on them. The weapon selector switch is set to bombs. And we're going to ripple them off, remembering to use salvo because we are using the center pylon. After that, the only other system that we really use is the radar warning receiver. There's a good example in the video when we pop up of the two kinds of tones that you may get with that receiver. First of all, you get the kind of ghosty tone that is what you get when a SAM radar is searching for you. And later on in the video you get the second high-pitched repeating tone that is what happens when the radar goes into tracking mode. Now, maybe some other people can confirm this. It seems to me from the testing that I did that you get the tracking tone even when the radar isn't tracking you. When it's tracking another aircraft, I think you still get the tracking tone. I'm not sure if that's real world realistic or not, but that certainly seems to be the way that DCS operates. If anybody else has a different experience, they can let me know in the comments. So in the first video, that's pretty much it for the actual aircraft systems. In terms of the tactics, techniques, and procedures, there's really only two that we're using in this video that are interesting. One is, what is referred to as guns jinking, and that is that as we're flying down the valley, we are constantly turning from side to side. They're not hard turns because they're not designed to bleed off any speed, but in a situation where you would expect to find some low-level AAA, and there are some in the valley, even if they aren't shooting at us, in that situation, you don't really want to be flying with your wings level. You want to be constantly changing your direction of flight from side to side and doing it kind of unpredictably. Remember that these are unguided weapons. They're basically high rate of fire cannons, like a machine gun, that's being aimed by a person who has to lead the target, that's you, in the right manner to actually, make the bullets coincide with your airplane. So the more you can do to make that unpredictable, the less likely they are to be able to hit you. The second technique that's used in the video is obviously reasonably high altitude dive bombing approach to a target. I am not going to claim to be an expert in this. I'm not even going to claim to be particularly good at it. If you want to learn a lot more about how to use this technique, then certainly by all means go to one of the videos that I'll put in the comments by Bonds, who really does an excellent job. And by the way, he's an ex-A4 pilot, so he knows whereof he speaks, and he really goes through in great detail how to make this work. The bottom line is that what you're trying to do is to get the airplane at a set speed, at a set dive angle, and at a set altitude, and also have the pipper over the target at the same time. This isn't an easy thing to do. There are techniques, obviously, that you can learn to make it easier, but at the end of the day, this is really a physical skill, and like any physical skill, it needs to be practiced for you to get good at it. And so I would certainly encourage you to watch Bonds' video, to set up a bombing range and to practice. I know I spent a lot more time practicing at the bombing range than I did actually flying these missions, and at least with the A4, I think it's the only way to get good at using the airplane as a weapons delivery system. So in terms of planning your mission, I think there's also a little bit going on in the first video. You can see that really our preoccupation in this video is the fact that we have a SAM site that can see us if we get up high enough. And although it takes a few minutes to lock on, like almost 3 in a lot of testing I did, it still means that we really want to limit the amount of time that we spend at any kind of altitude, even though we also want to deliver the ordnance from altitude, because flying low over the target is dangerous because of the amount of low-level flak. So we basically made a plan that uses the terrain to mask us from the radar until we're ready to pop up. We plan it carefully so we know about where our initial point is and what bearing we have to fly from that to take us over the target, so we won't be surprised when we pop up. And then we also notice that we've got the headland on the other side of the harbor, and we can use that to provide masking as we egress. So when we pull out of our dive, we head straight for the saddle between the headland and then come around behind it, and that blocks us from the radar again. Now, when we pop out the other side, the radar does find us, and we actually do get a tracking tone in this video. And even though the SAM site does actually launch a couple of missiles, they're aimed at other aircraft and not at us. So the important thing to notice here is that we made a plan based on the terrain that we had, based on the enemy systems that were available, and based on what would take us over the target in a direction that was going to allow us to drop the bombs effectively on the target. So there was some thought that went into how we got up there, how we got into the attack, and how we got out again safely. So the second and third videos are really about low-level attack missions, and that's the main thing that I was trying to, think about, learn about in flying those two missions. So I'll talk about them together. There really isn't a whole lot new in terms of using the aircraft systems, but the AWCS panel does set up quite differently. So first of all, we're not using all of the pylons. And second of all, we're using a much longer ripple interval, and we are rippling in pairs this time because we're not using the center pylon because we've got a tank on it. And in the case of the convoy with the CBUs, we're using a particularly long ripple interval because we've actually got the 10 times multiplier on, and we're actually putting them in ripple single to make sure that we stretch those out over a really long time. We're also going to use a large downward deflection on the sight. In the case of the CBUs, we actually need 200 mils. That means actually we need to adjust the sight up a little so we can actually see the gun sight. Now, the one thing that is quite different about both of the low-level missions, obviously, is figuring out how to set up for the attack run. The issue here is that you're going to be going low, you're going to be going fast, so you don't have a lot of time to line up on the target. And it's not only that you have to be pointed at the target, you have to approach the target in a very particular direction because you're really trying to drop bombs along a line, either along or just barely across the bridge or directly down that road where the convoy is. So it takes a little bit of thinking to figure out how you're going to set up and what you're going to look at and how you're going to fly the airplane so that you arrive over the target going 400 knots at 500 feet, but also flying in exactly the right direction. Now, the way I do it in both cases, and there may be better ways of doing it, I would love to hear it if there are, is I kind of take a look at the target, the line that I need to fly along, across the target, along the target, and I extend that line out, and I look for a terrain feature. In the second video, it was a bend in the river. In the third video, it was a big house that was essentially in the middle of the town, and so I use that as the point that I want to aim to end my dive at, because I figure if I fly over that point and I am also aimed at the target as I fly over it, then I will also be lined up not only with the target but with the axis that I have to fly down. And so that's kind of how I tried to fly both of those. They worked out reasonably well. The third mission in particular, I was really pleased with. The amount of damage we did there was actually pretty spectacular. I think, again, there's a lot to take away from these videos in terms of how to plan a mission like this. I think the point I was trying to make in both of the missions is that it's really hard to fly a mission like this if you haven't seen the target first, unless you have much higher quality navigation aids than I think you really have in the A4. You do need to fly past the target or over the target, and you do need to plan your approach. The issue is, how to do that in a way that doesn't alert the air defenses so that you're flying into a storm of lead when you do that. So we used slightly different approaches in both of the videos. In the second video, we flew pretty high and pretty over on the open side of the valley. On the third video, what we basically did was rely on the fact that it was dark, and also that if we flew up to the far end of the valley and came back, that the sun would be behind us, which makes an airplane especially an airplane that's moving fast, makes an airplane pretty hard to see from the ground. And we depended on that to keep the flak from basically picking us up in time to shoot at us. In both cases, we were pretty successful, didn't get a lot of flak. And in fact, in the third video, you can see that the only gun that had a go at us actually had a go after we pulled up, and we're making ourselves pretty visible by flying against the bright sky and no longer coming out of the sun. So I think the idea of flying out of the sun in the dark actually worked pretty well. What I seem to have seen in DCS, which I think is good modeling of reality, is that the first time that you fly in over a flak installation, especially if you come in low level, with a reasonable amount of surprise, you don't get a lot of response from the flak. The flak really starts to respond after they've had a minute to know what's going on. Particularly if you happen to come back over a target area after a first run, you can expect the flak to be much more intense than it was the first time. Which is what I expected based on the accounts from Vietnam, where pilots were basically told the one thing they should never do is fly over the same target area twice. Okay, I think that's going to wrap it up for this video. It's already pretty long. We've covered the first 3 videos in the Haiphong Harbour series. I'll probably do a part 2 of these when I talk about the next 3, so we can talk about things like the nav computer and the radar and the Shrike missile. One thing I did want to say before I signed off, though, was to remember that the A4 mod is a community mod and it's completely free. You could fly all of the missions in this set without actually ever having to pay anything, since the basic DCS is also free. So if you're interested in this kind of thing, you really should give it a try. I'm convinced that if you do, you'll want to try some of the paid modules, and you'll become one of those people that's flying in DCS all the time. For now, that's it for me. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying these videos, and until next time, this is Sidekick, signing off.